Nobody teaches us how to process our feelings.
Yes.
I know you and I are probably similar in age. When we were growing up,
Yeah.
I was told, what are you crying about?
Yes.
You don't need to cry about that. We were told how to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And in our parents' defense, they were trying to make it better, trying to fix it. We didn't know what we know now.
Mm-hmm.
We now know that if we let a negative feeling come up and we feel it, that it actually only takes about 15 or 20 minutes for it to work itself out.
Today, I'm going to be talking to Janeen Herskovitz, and I want to welcome Janeen to A Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. Janeen is a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and the owner of Puzzle Piece Counseling. She earned her bachelor's degree in special education from Rowan University in New Jersey and her master's of arts in mental health counseling from Webster University. She's been married to her husband, Joe, since 1995, and together they have 2 young adult neurodivergent children. Janeen's private practice, Puzzle Piece Counseling, is located in Jacksonville, Florida, and helps autistic families and neurodivergent individuals live more peaceful lives. Her podcast, Autism Blueprint, covers a variety of topics surrounding autism in the home. I'm so pleased to have Janeen as a guest on Mother's Guide Through Autism today. Welcome, Janeen, to A Mother's Guide Through Autism. I'm so excited to have you. We got to visit a little bit before we hit the record button, and you seem like a really cool, open person. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So let's dive in about your personal journey with autism. Tell us about your son and his diagnosis as well.
Sure. So my son, Benjamin, he's 25 now, and he was diagnosed when he was about 3.5. And so that was in 2001. So that diagnosis came just a few months before 9/11. So that's how I always remember the year was 2001. It's quite a year.
Yes, it was.
It really was. So, and he started out hitting milestones pretty consistently. Speech was always really slow coming, but it was coming. And we just kind of started to see him kind of fade away. So we eventually did get him diagnosed. It took about a year to get the full diagnosis. And back then, I hate to be like back in my day but there wasn't a whole lot of support. The internet wasn't what it is now. I wasn't a therapist at the time, so I really didn't have a lot of knowledge about how to handle all the big feelings that came along with this diagnosis.
Yeah, and I'm nodding my head. I can totally relate to that because Joseph was diagnosed in 96. And so exactly what you're saying, not a lot of resources.
Yes. You know all too well.
Yes. So with your son's diagnosis, because we are doing a grief series, I know that whether other moms are aware of it or other parents are aware of it, there is a grief process that happens. You may not be aware of it when you're going through it. So can you tell us about the grief you experienced and the autism diagnosis of your son, about that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So because I didn't realize that there was a grief process to this, I kind of went into, I remember coming home from the diagnosis feeling very numb, feeling like, well, a combination of numb and being punched in the gut. I remember my husband describes it as, I just felt like someone just punched me in the gut and didn't really give you a lot of direction. So you have the grief of, okay, there's something not right with my child, and what is this going to mean for his future? And I was a special education teacher. I have my bachelor's in special ed. And so my feeling was, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to know how to navigate this. And I just have no clue how this is going to go down and what to do. I had a baby at the time. My daughter is 2 years younger than Ben. So she's just flying ahead with her milestones and bypassing him. And so watching this, and at the time I was a stay-at-home mom. I should have never been a stay-at-home mom because it wasn't my thing. But I thought, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do when I have kids. So I'm going to do it. They're only young once. And, part of me, partly glad that I did, because I didn't see this coming. Like I didn't see autism coming. Ben was always super, super smart. He was hyperlexic, which means that he is kind of really into letters and numbers, and he could spell his name, Janeen Herskovitz, poor kid. We gave him this long name, and he could spell it. Like he would go up on the refrigerator and put the letters, those little magnetic letters, and spell his name, but we couldn't have a conversation. So there were these splinter skills all over the place. So witnessing all of that, and I know your listeners can probably relate, you have all these mixed feelings, like how am I feeling versus how should I be feeling? And, people saying things to you like, well, at least it's not, at least it's not cancer. At least it's not leukemia. At least it's, and people really who are well-meaning, trying to help, kind of try to talk you out of how you're feeling. So what ended up happening to me was about a year after the diagnosis, I hit rock bottom with a severe depression. I had these 2 little kids. I had a toddler with autism that didn't want to be in the same room as the baby. And here I am trying to take care of them both. It was really, really hard. And I never let myself at that time admit how hard it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very common, isn't it? The more moms I talk to, is just like, man, it's not exactly the same, but boy, it is very close to hitting that rock bottom, that depression, and not giving yourself permission to just go, oh my gosh, this is so hard.
Yeah. And then watching my husband, because at the time, autism wasn't a word that we hear as much as we hear it now. Probably similar with your situation. And my husband just was like, what is this? What does this mean? And so I'm explaining this to him from just kind of a psychoeducational perspective, like, okay, well, here's what I know. But even what I knew as a special educator was very little. And it wasn't the understanding that we have now. There's a lot of assumptions we made about kids on the spectrum that they didn't understand what we were saying to them, that they couldn't grow and change. And, there were just so many things that would make it even more difficult to handle. So I felt like I had to be strong. I had to be the strong one because my husband was like falling apart. We took turns falling apart, by the way.
Yeah. It's hard to really go back there. And when I remember it, I often think, how did I do that?
Yes.
Where did I get the strength? It's so incredibly hard, that diagnosis. It's so doom and gloom. And very few people said, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
Yes, I love that. And that's, I have a mom's group that meets, an autism moms group that meets in person on Wednesday nights. And I remind them of that all the time. As long as you have some people in your life that you can share your actual feelings with, and they're not going to try to explain it away. I call those safe people. Our safe people are not going to try to convince us how to feel otherwise. And those safe people may or may not have a child with a disability. In my experience, I've had really good friends in both camps. I have a very close friend that doesn't have any children with disabilities, and she's an amazing support for me.
Mhm.
And then I have other friends that do, and they support in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important to have that support system. And you never know how other people are going to respond to a diagnosis. Most folks don't know how to respond, right?
That's right.
So we all do our best. And I love that. I love that you have a group that gets together, because I think that support is so essential on your autism journey.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons that I went back to school to be I was interested in mental health, but I just, did it after my son was diagnosed, because I thought, there's support for the kids, there's plenty of therapies, but there's really nothing for the parents.
Yeah.
And so that's what I went back to grad school to create. And while I was in grad school, I created the curriculum for the moms, because it was near and dear to my heart. And I've been running it for, gosh, ever since
I love that. I love,
2000, I don't know, 2008 or 9.
wow. Good. That is putting some goodness in the world. And you having that health counselor, the mental health counselor degree, knowledge, and then your own experience as a parent that has a child that is on the autistic spectrum. Do you find commonalities, like as you're working with in your field in the mental health counseling? What are some of the commonalities that you experience, and that of your patients in terms of the grief?
Yeah, sure. So usually if I can, I would say if I can get my hands on the mama within the first year that the child's been diagnosed, that's my favorite client to work with,
Yes.
because I can give them a safe space to process the grief. And I felt like I can relate to the grief they're going through, but I didn't feel like I had the space to actually process it, because I didn't want to talk to my husband because he was suffering too. I didn't want to talk to my friends because I felt like they didn't understand. And
Right.
then here I am at home with my kids. So I try to get a good idea from my clients about what kind of support do you have? Are there friends that will get it? Can we connect you with other women who get it if there's nobody in your life that gets it?
Mm.
So I see some of the commonalities I see are just feeling really hopeless, feeling like they're not doing enough is
Yeah.
a huge one. And I had a feeling you'd be able to relate to that. It's almost every single mom that I come in contact with is like, how do I know if I'm doing enough? Do I need to go to therapy 7 days a week? Do I need to, and so I'm of the mindset now that I'm kind of 25 years into it, where I'm like, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to take care of yourself, because if you don't, you're going to make a lot of the mistakes that I did, which is running myself into the ground and just not caring for my mental health. So
Yeah. I think that is a commonality that I hear over and over again. So while I'm doing this series on grief, mom after mom after mom, who, by the way, the moms I'm interviewing are rock stars
they're
because,
amazing, aren't they? They really are.
well,
Autism
yeah,
moms are great.
I just the strength, the way you're paying it forward, and just it's so like I craved it. Like I remember when I was at the beginning stages of this journey, just if I could just talk to somebody that's been on this journey that can tell me that that all this doom and gloom. I mean, the forecast for Joseph's future was not positive.
Yep.
Right. So having these conversations, I think are so essential. And yeah, that grief is a commonality, and that we all feel like we should be doing a million things, and they're like the clock is running out, and fear the future. And then I talk to moms, and they say, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't have, what do you mean take care of myself? Yeah, we're
Right.
all saying now, coming back in these interviews, if you listen to each interview, somebody along the way, although each conversation is unique and different, It's on the same topic. And every one of us is saying the same thing. Take
Yeah.
care of yourself.
Right. And I always get that deer in headlights look when I say that in a session, because they're like, oh yeah, that's funny. How is that, how's that going to happen? And, self-care for us doesn't look like it does for other people though. Self-care for me meant things like setting healthy boundaries, doing my own work in therapy so that I could take care of the stuff that was lying underneath. So
Mhm.
the interesting thing I've realized about having a child with a disability is it took anything that my husband and I hadn't dealt with in our lives and put it right at the top. It was kind of like this leavening agent, right? Or like when you pour like oil into water and it just floats right to the top. That's where all of our issues were. My perfectionism reared its ugly head, my anxiety that I just thought was growing up Italian. Turns out it's not, it's an anxiety disorder.
I can relate because, yeah.
I mean, I had to come to terms with all of these things within myself, that if it weren't for these struggles with my son, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And that sounds so cliche, and I don't want that to sound like toxic positivity, and what I mean by that is sometimes in the beginning of the diagnosis, a lot of mothers think, okay, well, I'm just going to be positive about it. This is a blessing. And I'm not saying it isn't. There are moments of it being joyful, and you definitely appreciate things that maybe other parents don't.
Mhm.
But it's hard. And I find that I limit the podcasts that I do and any forums that I do or webinars or groups. I always stress this is for the parents and caregivers. This is not necessarily for people on the spectrum that aren't caring for someone with autism,
Yes.
because I don't want them to feel badly about the grief that we're all trying to process.
Right. Yeah, because that gets tricky because, Joseph and I do a lot of work together. We wrote our book together. And in that relationship, I don't want him to feel bad either. But, but he looks at it as his way of thinking is, I'm so grateful that you're my mom. So because you do care, and because, all those things. But I understand that sensitivity, and I'm so glad that you said that, because I do believe I have a lot of parents who are also on the spectrum.
Yes.
That are raising these kids. So it's not, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right. Right. It is funny because people have said, if you could go back and do it differently, would you not have a child with autism? And my answer is no. I would go back and do it, but I would go back with the knowledge I have now.
Yes.
Right. I can do it now. I'm like,
Yeah.
give me a 4 or 5 year old. Like I can do it now.
I know. It's so true, because I look back and I do. I wish I would have had done all this inner work, exactly what you're talking about, how all of it comes up, things that you haven't dealt with. And it's like, okay, wow, you can't help but have that inner awareness of, oh, I've got some work to do.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about aligning all the therapies and all that is all important, but the message is, which is so hard at the beginning, if you don't heal and work on you, you're going to really miss out, but not just you, but your child.
Yes. Yes. And I know my husband has given me permission to tell pieces of his story. So I want to make sure, I want to say that first, before I tell his story. But he would go through times, because the other thing about grief is that men and women experience grief differently, and they process it differently. Just people in general do. Everybody's gonna process differently at a different pace, and it's going to have a lot to do with the family you grew up in and with whatever your experiences were up until now. But I would say things to him like, "Oh my gosh, Ben said this today," because he speaks, but it was always scripted speech. And
Yes.
so if he came up with something original and my husband would come home from work and of course he's exhausted and then he's got to come home to this. And I'm just like all excited, like, guess what he did today? And he was just like, yeah, that's great. Okay. All right. Well, he's still autistic, so it was the kind of thing where, he didn't say that out loud, but I know that's kind of why he couldn't get too excited.
Right.
And then he ended up with pretty severe PTSD at one point when my son would like to escape from the house quite often.
Oh,
And so one time he escaped on my husband's watch and it was just devastating for him. I wasn't home at the time. And it was just awful. And he hit rock bottom with post-traumatic stress disorder and went to a therapist who did EMDR therapy with him, which is a trauma therapy. And he came home a different person after a couple of sessions. And I
wow.
just said, what did they do to you? And how do I learn how to do it? So then I went and got trained in EMDR, and I do it with my parents, not only to help with the traumatic experiences that can sometimes go along with raising our kids, but also to help process the grief. So it's
Yeah.
a very helpful tool in helping process grief.
Yeah. I don't think that it's a bad thing
Right.
to say, you know what, I have post-traumatic stress syndrome from this diagnosis or whatever it is in your life. I really love that your husband's willing to come out and say those things. A lot of people, especially in my generation, there's such a stigma that goes along with coming out and saying, yeah, you know what, I needed help.
Yeah.
I did hit rock bottom. I didn't know what to do, because it makes you, the way I was raised is that could be frowned upon or looked at like you're not strong, or, like you would feel like you would lose respect in whatever profession, or your society just really has a terrible stigma on it still.
Yeah. Yeah. They really do. And I mean, at the time, my husband was a high school social studies teacher. And I remember my mother-in-law saying, well, what is school going to think? How is he going to take this time off? What is school? And it's a valid question, but I just said, he can't go. Like, he's got to take some time off and heal. And too bad what everybody thinks. But I think that plays into the grief too. It's kind of like, who's going to judge me because of the way I'm asking for help or the kind of help that I'm getting?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of moms that I work with that feel guilty about getting the help, and also, all the expenses that go along with getting help, whether you have insurance coverage or not. It's pretty high dollar, all these therapies. And I know there's more help out there now, but it doesn't matter. You have so much money, and the mom, or at least I did too, felt the guilt of spending money on myself.
Absolutely. Yes. I still catch myself because I'm like, okay, wait, what would I tell a client?
Me too. I have
Yeah.
that awareness now, but I didn't.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'll, and my husband and I are very good at kind of checking in with each other. How are you doing? How are you feeling today? How'd this week go for you? And sometimes I'll be like, I think I might need to call my therapist. And I do have one.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, yeah, you should. And inside I'm like, ooh, just seeing the dollar signs. But I forget that, like, that's honestly, if I could give one piece of parenting advice, just to parents in general, it's do your own work. Because
Yeah.
whatever work you don't do, you end up passing it on to your kids. What you don't deal with gets either passed on inadvertently,
Yeah.
or ends up affecting your own mental health. Because
That's so true.
push it down, and I did that for so long. I was like, I can't be sad about this. This kid's amazing. Look how cute he is. And here are all the things he can do. And his sister's going to be fine. And, but inside I'm freaking out.
I know. And there were so many days I had stuffed so deep that I didn't even know it existed, but until something would trigger it. It was a wild ride, really.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. If you don't deal with it, it deals with you.
It does.
That is truth, everyone listening. True, 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 true. You wrote an article in 2011 called Processing Grief Over a Loved One's Autism Diagnosis. And you talked about how going through your yearly tradition of a good cry on your son's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
You still follow that tradition?
I don't, because I don't have to anymore. So at that time, I think when his first couple of birthdays, I was just kind of still in a place of like, not denial, but not really feeling all my feelings,
Mhm.
So I'd put on a, stiff upper lip. And I think when he turned 5, that was the first time I woke up that morning and I was just a mess. I was a mess. I had all these expectations for what 5 was going to look like, how he was going to be talking better. And, now he's starting formal school, because we had done a home-based play therapy program up until then. And I just I didn't want to let go. I didn't want to let him out of my sight. You know what I mean? I know a lot of the parents understand when you have a child that can't make their needs and wants known,
Yes.
it's such a vulnerable feeling. So I kind of realized at that time, okay, every year on the birthday, I wake up sad and I have to just cry it out and get it over with and then move on.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I learned to feel my feelings when they would come up. I'm a crier. That's how I process. So I would just do it. And I just accepted that about myself. And then I would move on. And I noticed probably in the last 5 years, his birthday would come and feel okay, and kind of go, oh, all right, we're okay now. I don't know what next year's going to feel like. I don't know what, you just never know. Feelings are funny things that way.
They are. And what do you think the biggest aha, I guess, for lack of a better term, that all of a sudden you notice and I don't need to do that anymore. What do you think made that difference? Like why?
That's a great question. I think, and this is something that I also get the deer in headlights look from my clients. I think it's learning how to feel my feelings.
Mm,
So I'll say to clients, all right, well, we're just going to sit with that. What do you mean we're going to sit with that? I'm like, yeah, I want you to just feel it. What comes up for you when you feel it? Where do you feel it in your body? What does it feel like? Nobody teaches us how to process our feelings.
yes.
I mean, I know you and I are probably similar in age. When we were growing up,
Yeah.
I was told, what are you crying about?
Yes.
You don't need to cry about that. We were told how to feel.
Hmm.
And in our parents' defense, they were trying to make it better, trying to fix it. We didn't know what we know now.
Hmm.
We now know that if we let a negative feeling come up and we feel it, that it actually only takes about 15 or 20 minutes for it to work itself out.
No, that's good news.
Yeah. But if we don't feel it, which
Uh-huh.
most of the time we don't, right? Well, because who has time, right? You're going through your day, something will
Right.
trigger an emotion and you'll just go, okay, no, let me take a Xanax, or let me get involved in work, or let me, not that there's anything wrong with distractions, but if all you ever do is distract yourself when you're feeling those negative feelings, then they're going to
Right.
get pushed down and pushed down. They don't go away.
No, they don't.
They just pop up someplace else.
Right.
I remember one time I was like pushing it down, and I was in the cereal aisle, and my son was allergic to just about everything when he was a kid. So I'm in the cereal aisle and I'm looking for something he can eat. And I broke down when I saw like my favorite cereal that I couldn't give him, or something. Like it was something minor where I shouldn't have had this reaction, but I literally burst into tears and was sobbing in the cereal aisle. And I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Yes, I've had those moments like you're like, I think I've lost it.
I think something's really wrong with me. Yeah. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just feeling a lot of emotion. And grief is funny that way. Grief comes out of nowhere.
It does.
And
Ugh.
if we can recognize it as that and go, oh, okay, I know what this is, it's a little bit easier to handle. Then we're not going down that rabbit hole of, something wrong with me. I must be crazy. I must be a bad mom.
Yeah.
It's pretty normal for things to affect us. Things like when my son was 12 and I would see the boys his age outside riding skateboards and bikes and playing with, my son couldn't do that, didn't
Right.
do it. That was hard. Usually, and parents tell me a lot that they do this too. Prom season, I stay off of social media. I can't,
Yeah, it just kind of makes me go, oh, instant like sadness, because it's another life experience that we as parents are not enjoying, whether
yes,
your kids go or not. The fear of what is this going to be like? Should they go? Should they not go?
exactly.
It's just another
Yeah.
life experience gone that we hoped and dreamed of.
Yes. So I think, at least for me and my husband, we eventually got to a place where we were like, you know what? This is our life and
Mhm.
we get to make it look the way we want. And there aren't any have tos, really. We just do it the way that we know works for Ben and works for us.
Yeah.
The works
Right.
for us, I think, has become more important. I know the child is the center of the universe when you're raising them, because it's hard for them not to be. They have
Yeah.
so many needs that you have to address. But after a while, we would like check in with each other, like, okay, we got invited to this birthday party. Do you want to go? Are you up for going? Do you want to go and take two cars so that both kids can go? And if Ben has to leave, one of us can go. Like, it became very strategic. And I kind of got over eventually that feeling of, oh, woe is me. Why do I have to do this?
Right. Right.
Why did this happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff happened. Why not me?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So you tell us about the different cyclical grief. You want to talk a little bit about that and give us a better understanding of what that word means and how it works?
Sure. Yeah. So I found that while I was doing a paper in grad school, and I don't have the source off the top of my head, but I know it's in that 2011 article.
Yeah.
It was, I think, an Australian team of researchers that found that this cyclical grief happens in people that are either dealing with a child that has like a mental health disorder or a developmental delay,
Mm.
right? Different kind of grief if you have a loved one that's going to eventually pass away from what they're dealing with. But when that's not on our radar, which our kids, I think they have kind of a typical life expectancy. I know that accidents kind of for our kids are an issue, but generally we're going to be living with this for the rest of our lives, and then we're going to have to figure out, what do we do when we're not here anymore?
Right.
All of that can kind of add to the grief. So that being said, we go through these stages of grief, and then sometimes we circle back around to them again and again and again.
Yes.
And so there might be times where you might be going through that anger stage of grief even years later. Or I might get, there's certain things that just really will trigger that anger stage of grief in me. And then all of a sudden I'm back there.
Right. Yes.
So, and I think eventually you get to a place of not necessarily acceptance, like this is okay, but kind of I like to call it creating your new normal.
Yes. Yeah.
So whatever you thought your life was going to be, okay, it's not that anymore. We finally get to the point where we're like, okay, this is what our life looks like, and this is just how it is. And so you kind of start, at least for me, I start planning my life around the fact that I have this child with a disability, because this is our reality. You kind of get to an acceptance of the reality.
Yeah, I call it how to be okay with not being okay.
I love that.
Because, and I didn't have that aha until I was in therapy over other life tsunamis that I had experienced, and autism being one of those, but this was a separate life tsunami that I was going through. And I was just like, you know what? I am so tired of trying to get over it. What
Yeah.
if I never get over it? What
Yeah.
if I'm never okay with whatever it is?
Yeah.
That's okay.
It sure is. It just
Yeah,
becomes part of who you are and you just learn to live with it.
right. And that was such a relief for me because I was working so hard to be okay with whatever it was. And I was like, no, I'm not okay with that outcome ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great example. I love that. Well, and because life does happen on
Yeah.
top of all that we're dealing with, right? I kind of almost subconsciously, it wasn't a conscious thought. I almost thought like, okay, we've met our quota. So we're good,
Same
right? Like
thing.
when my daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy and then ADHD and then, other things come along and you're just like, I remember after my daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy and my son had autism, my husband and I looked at each other and said, we're never going to find a babysitter again. Like this,
It's like, what?
who's going to watch our kids? Like, so
Yeah.
life just happens on top of it. And then you have to deal with like normal life stuff.
Right. Right. And so that's another reason why I wish for myself that I wouldn't have waited so late in the game, if you will, to really get the healing and all the mental health care that I needed that I didn't even realize. Like, man, I'm a professional stuffer, I thought. I'm so good. I'm the best there is.
Really good at this. Yeah. Well, when you've
Yeah.
been doing it for a lifetime, you get good at it.
Yeah. And then when I started unloading all of it, I was like, wow, I feel better. I wish I would have done this sooner.
It's amazing. People, I mean, you were talking before about it, the stigma and it being a sign of weakness. There is no bigger sign of strength than someone coming to therapy and saying, here's my stuff. I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I am. I heard this once from a really smart man. He's a spiritual leader, Michael Beckwith. Anyway, I heard him and he said, you know what the acronym for HELP is? And I was thinking, oh, I can't wait to hear this. And he said, it's hello, eternal loving presence. It's a prayer.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And that resonated with me. And I thought, because I was always, if I ask for help, I'm weak. If I ask, or is there a limit to how much help I get to ask for? Because, like what we were talking about earlier, yeah, life does happen. It surely does, on top of other life tsunamis like autism.
Yeah. Well, and here's the huge realization that I had regarding what you're talking about. We have to teach our children how to ask for help because they're going to need it for the rest of their lives
Yes, I love that.
in some capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm experiencing this with my clients as well. Like if we can lead by example,
Mhm.
then we can help our kids advocate for themselves.
Yes.
But we can't do that if we've got a cup that's full like this much or none, you know.
Mhm.
We've got to figure out how to get ourselves where we can, not only function properly, but you can be happy again.
Yes. Say that again.
You can be happy again. I mean, I want parents to know this.
Mhm.
This doesn't have to be doom and gloom for the rest of your life or the rest of your child's existence. You really can be happy again. As limited as my son is in his verbal ability, he has the best sense of humor and he cracks us up sometimes. And when we laugh, then he starts laughing and just I don't even remember what he said last night, but because he scripts and we speak his language, he'll use a script that's just perfect for the situation and funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there's just these moments of just absolute joy now
Yes.
because we've done our work. My husband and I both have done our work. This marriage would have never lasted if we didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's and it's really hard to when you are on zero, your fuel tank is on zero, to think about doing one more thing. But if you could just pick that thing of getting the help that you need to feel better, your tank automatically fills up. And
Yeah.
you're right, marriages, other relationships suffer if you
Yes.
don't.
Well, and I know this one isn't about marriage, but I just want to share that
Yeah.
when we weren't doing well as a couple and our kids were little, we stopped all Ben's therapies for about 6 months
Mm.
and just focused on us. I had a therapist, my husband had a therapist, and then we had a third therapist that did our couples work. Because we were like, you know what? We owe it to these kids to stay together. So we've got to deal with our stuff. We could do all the therapies in the world for him, but we really, and luckily, I mean, not all couples are able to do this, but luckily he and I were both on the same page about that piece. Like, we need to make ourselves the best parent we can be. So we did that. And then I just remember thinking, we're not going to have time. And I
Mm.
remember my husband saying, well, then we cancel his therapies for a while. And I was like, what?
Yeah, that's a,
It didn't, in the big scheme of things, 6
yeah.
months did not make that big of a difference, although it made a huge difference in the way we parented.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of really truly putting yourself first so that you can show up for the rest of this journey. And I did it backwards, I waited until, because I am a professional stuffer and I'm great at denial. So, of course, but if you can receive that message in this episode, just really hear that, kind of what you said earlier, what you ask your moms to do is just sit with that for a minute and believe it, because your son's 25, my son's 31, and you will hear those moms that their kids are older. We're all saying the same thing. So take it in. It's okay to get help for yourself.
Yes, whether that's with a therapist or with a life coach, or good life coaches are skilled at knowing when to send you to a therapist if they have to.
I agree.
That's what I've learned, at least the ones that I have kept in touch with and know what they're doing.
Mhm. Yeah,
So, not everybody needs a therapist for any kind of like mental health disorder. It might just be you need a coach or a therapist to help you be able to sit with feelings.
Yes, that's and yeah, I don't know about you, but when I'm working with moms, that's one of their least favorite thing to do, because I'll say, okay, I can't leave this session without a feeling word. I'm sorry. Nobody's been a fan of that yet that I'm aware of.
Yeah, they don't really like it.
And I get it. And I know that it's a challenge. And a lot of us are professional stuffers. And so it takes a long time to finally be able to feel whatever it is you're feeling in that moment and not judge it, whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh, and not judge it. Wow, that's huge too.
Yeah.
That's difficult because we judge ourselves so harshly.
Yeah. That guilt seeps in, or they'll give me a feeling word and they're like, is that okay? I'm like, I'm not here to grade your feelings. But if that's really what you're feeling, you bet it's okay.
Yeah.
And good for you for playing with me, and being willing to go there, right? Because it is hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to know, how has your autism journey changed now that your son is a young adult?
Oh, what a good question. I'm glad that we don't deal with school anymore. That's changed. And I feel like it's taken a lot of pressure off and given me a lot of perspective just for the things that I fought for, that I would love to go back and go, you know what? No, let's not worry about that math score. Let's work on life skills instead. But we get so caught up in, we want them to fit in. We want them to be, I just wanted him to be in school. And I think by the time he got to like 16 or 17, he just refused to go. He wouldn't go anymore. And I realized later it's because nobody would presume his competence where he was going. Nobody would treat him as if he understood. And he just hated it. So I think that kind of changed where I thought, you know what, forget school. Let's, whatever, we're going to just figure out what's next for him. And then he started really getting into art and doing art. So we started to follow his lead more now that he's an adult, because he can express himself better. His yeses and nos are reliable. And once they can communicate better or more effectively, whatever method they use, it's easier to know that at least now I'm doing what he wants for himself. So Ben communicates now with a combination of some speech, some writing, and some typing, and some singing, believe it or not. Like, he'll be walking around singing a song or scripting something, and I'm like, and now I can ask him, are you trying to communicate with me, or are you just scripting because it's fun? And he'll tell me if I give him a choice of the two things. And then I'll try to kind of dig deeper, and then he'll tell me to back off, because having a mom as a therapist is not fun.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
I'm not a therapist, but I get
but yeah,
like,
exactly. Well, and now there's like new stressors. They're different stressors.
right.
They're just, I'm not having to deal with a lot of the stuff that we had to deal with when he was younger, but now we're dealing with kind of new things. Like, okay, well, what are we going to try next? He's gotten really into cooking, and should we try a day program? Ben's been home with, my son is home with my husband most of the time now, because my husband decided to retire early from teaching and just be with him full time. Which has been great, because then I could grow my practice. It was kind of like I had one foot in, one foot out. So actually now this is so much nicer for me, because they go and do their guy things, and they cook together, and they go shopping together, and, go to the beach and things like that. And I can just kind of go to work and not worry about a school calling me.
Oh, I know that feeling. Yes, yes, yes.
I know that if my husband calls, something's very wrong.
Yes.
Otherwise, he does not bother me all day. And so that's a huge difference, and something that I didn't realize I needed in my life, was be able to get through my day without having to check the phone all the time.
Yeah, that dreaded phone call, right? Like I remember
pops up on the phone.
Oh gosh, eggshells. And I worked at the school. Hello.
Oh my gosh.
So when I got called out of meetings, I knew it wasn't going to be good. So.
Well, that's how my husband felt, because he worked in the same school district as my son. And when your name is Herskovitz, you can't fly under the radar.
No.
Everybody knows you.
Yes. And so yeah, it is a different season for sure, for me too, but it is also a journey, and it does look different. And my son is living independently now.
Nice.
And since he was 29, and things look different, but I am on call.
Yes.
Not because of him, because of me.
I can relate.
Yes. Like,
yes.
He's great. Trust.
Oh, that's great.
And so it's me checking in. It's me going, I call them crazy monkeys of fear start taking over. I'm like, whoa, Bridget, just because you haven't heard from them in a few days doesn't mean something's wrong, So I'm a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because I tell my clients all the time, like, I don't want you to think I have it all together over here.
Right.
Like, I don't know if it's comforting to know that I don't have it all together, but I don't. So if you need someone that does, you might want to go elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a magic wand.
No, but we can figure this out together, and I can give you some insight, because I might be further along the journey than you are.
Exactly. That is the key element, I think, is that we've taken all these years on this journey and we're applying it. And I love what I do. And I can certainly see that you love what you do.
I really do. I really love it.
You're full of the passion and I can feel it. And this has been such a fun interview for me. I just love visiting, and this felt like just a really good conversation. So
I
I,
agree completely, Bridget. Thank you so much.
oh yeah, I do want to give you an opportunity though, before we officially go. Is there anything that you want to mention before we go that you didn't have a chance to talk about?
Sure. So my podcast is called Autism Blueprint, and you can find that, wherever you get podcasts. I'm working on another season right now. Took a little time off because had to. Felt guilty, but got over it. Um, so there'll be some new episodes coming out, but that's, it's totally free. You can go on there and listen. And then I have Autism Blueprint Classroom is a website that I started creating with courses and resources and things like that. Right now, there's one course up there. And it's all about self-care. So it's all of the things. It's a mini course. It's only a half hour. And if your listeners use the code SAVE10, SAVETEN, they can get $10 off the price. I think it's like $39 or something, and they can get $10 off by using the code SAVE10 when they check out. If they want to take a look at the self-care course, and there's a PDF guide that goes with it and things like that, that kind of would get you started on what I would do in a session, the first couple of weeks, basically all about taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And as we have mentioned, how important that is. So SAVE10, SAVETEN, to get that discount, because I know we're all moms, and just even getting our nails done sometimes feels the guilt, that emotion, that feeling that we all struggle with. Yeah. Comes seeping in. So that's good to know. So we know where to find you. Is there anything else that you would like to mention?
I like that we stumbled upon that, you can be happy again. You can be happy again. It takes some work and it takes some time, and you've just gotta, what you focus on, you get more of. So
yeah, take that in.
Yeah.
That's big. That's big. Yes. And I agree 100%. You can be happy again. Thank you so, so much for being a guest in A Mother's Guide Through Autism. I hope you'll come back and
love to
talk about whatever we decide we want to talk about to help our listeners out there navigate this autism journey.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
If you enjoyed this episode, please please subscribe, help Joseph and I spread our message of knowledge, hope, and inspiration. And let's get this message out there into the world. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in the next episode on this grief series. I'll see y'all. Bye.